Frieza's black, and back again. Now, that was a rather corny way to open up this video, but I couldn't think of any other way to do it, so let's just live with that. And for those of you who don't want to get spoiled for Dragon Ball Super Chapter 87, here is your chance to tune off. But before you go, just know that there will not be a manga chapter coming out in September of this year, because Toyotaro needs time to prepare for the upcoming Dragon Ball Super Manga arc itself, which will resume back in October. And once again, shout out to Dragon Ball Super Hype and Chronicles for always posting information about this stuff. A link will be in the description for you guys to get the direct news source. And in this video, you will also see the actual summaries themselves, so you can freeze the video and actually read it, and listen to the video in addition to that. So, besides all of that, guys, the first thing that we gotta talk about in this video is actually a rumor that is taking place with this upcoming arc and what happened in Chapter 87. So several of you guys asked me that I probably had inside information about what was going to happen in this upcoming arc, because the last video that I uploaded was, could Freeza ever become good? And I actually posted a poll where I asked you guys if you guys think Freeza could ever be good. And the poll results were overwhelmingly no, as you can see on your screen right now. And because of that, some of you thought, well, maybe Qaaman timed that video in conjunction with what I knew was going to happen, but that's actually not true. The reason why I posted that poll was because I was rewatching a fight with Goku versus Freeza on Namek, and after watching that and also understanding that Freeza still exists in the Dragon Ball universe, I just said to myself, well, guess what? If this arc is going to end soon, I'm curious what they're going to do with Freeza in the future, and I decided to post a poll, not knowing anything about what was going to happen in the upcoming arc. So there's no Dragon Ball YouTubers that were feeding me information about what was going to happen or anything like that. It's just a coincidence that happened just based off of what was going on at the time. So yeah, now that we got the rumor out of the way, let's get straight into why I think Freeza is actually good for coming back into the Dragon Ball Super story. Now, this is a pretty unpopular opinion, but hear me out. I actually think Freeza coming back is a really good thing, and the main reason is because this Granolah arc has been complete trash. It has brilliant concepts, I'll give it that. I think the concepts and the characters themselves have a lot of potential, but in typical Dragon Ball Super fashion, they weren't executed in the best way. Especially, we can say that now because, I mean, Elec and Gas are both dead. So, as a result of that, it doesn't seem like we're ever going to get more development for them, and I always felt that Elec had a lot more that he could have done in the story, but now that he's dead and he was killed by Freeza, well, there's not much else to say. And the reason why I think Freeza is good for Dragon Ball is because, let's just be honest here, Freeza is a very, very simple and effective character for Dragon Ball, and he's a safe character to use, because everybody knows who Freeza is. He's been used numerous times throughout Dragon Ball history, in both the anime, the manga, and multiple movies. So, when you factor all of that in, and the fact that Frieza's popular, it's very hard for Freeza to fail you in a Dragon Ball Super story. Now, granted, the Resurrection F arc was trash, mostly because the anime adaptation tried to stretch out a 2-hour movie and it made it a lot worse. But if you go back to the actual movie Resurrection F, it was a good self-contained story that was rather wrapped up, and we could have just moved on from there. So, factoring that and also how Freeza was used in the Tournament of Power, and also how he was used in Dragon Ball Super Broly, Freeza is a really good character to have around, and even if he's a repetitive villain that we've seen numerous times in the past, it's hard to have a bad arc when Frieza's the main guy, especially since he's gotten so much stronger, which we'll talk about more in a second. But I think that just wrapping up the arc and saying, this arc is trash, let's just bring Freeza back in and go from there, is actually better than trying to map out this complicated plot that wasn't going anywhere anyways, because there's still so many untold storylines that we still haven't figured anything else about. And I also liked how Freeza came into the scene, because I'm also reading off of the spoilers and from the information I know. He basically outsmarted Elec, because Elec was trying to draw Freeza onto the planet so that Gas could kill him, but Freeza figured that out, came back a lot stronger, and ended up killing both he and Gas. And I think that that was a very tough entrance for Freeza to have. I think Freeza coming in like that was really badass. And I definitely think that moving on forward, it creates a lot of excitement on, okay, what are we gonna have to do in dealing with Freeza now? Especially because he spared Goku and Vegeta, so now we have to question what his true motives are, because based off of how fatigued Goku and Vegeta were, he could have easily have killed them, especially considering how easily he wiped out Gas and how easily he beat up Goku and Vegeta with very little effort. So with all of that said, Frieza not killing them means that he wants them alive for a reason, which I think adds a lot of excitement for the next upcoming arc. So, as an unpopular opinion, I think Frieza coming back is actually a good thing. I'd rather have a repetitive villain that we know is a good villain and could push the story into a more serious and proper direction than trying to piece together this puzzle of this Granolah arc that's become a complete mess. Now, the next point that we're going to talk about is something that Goku said when he was referring to the greatest warrior. So, in the spoilers, it was revealed that Goku was talking to Whis about the greatest warrior being revealed and how the Oracle Fish was making a prediction. And in this prediction, he was talking about this greatest warrior, and we aren't sure whether or not Freeza was supposed to be this warrior, because Freeza was in his own sort of room of spirit and time training on another planet. So, at the end of this, it's suggesting that there's another great warrior that exists in the Dragon Ball universe. Now, I think a lot of us are probably going to jump to conclusion and say 7-3 is probably that warrior, if he can somehow figure out how, I don't know, like, we don't know what's going to happen to 7-3. We'll talk more about 7-3 later on in the video, but a lot of people are predicting that 7-3 might be that warrior. It might be Goku himself, because maybe the Oracle Fish was actually talking about Goku in a roundabout way. You know, it's very interesting to see where we're going to go with this direction when it comes to this greatest warrior thing. But I think the ultimate lesson that we learned in this arc is about cheating and how cheating doesn't exactly work, because as you can see, Granolah's lifespan has been shrunk trying to become the most powerful, and Gas was falling apart because he aged extremely fast because of the wish, you know, sapping up his life force to become so strong in such a short amount of time. So I think the ultimate lesson is that cheating doesn't necessarily work when you work yourself into trying to become the most powerful mortal. And I really think who this next mortal or this greatest warrior is going to be a really interesting, you know, talking point for the next arc, because we're going to assume it's a villain, and it's probably not Freeza, because if it was Freeza, that would be way too obvious. So there's probably somebody else who's another threat out there that nobody's talking about. Now we're going to go a little bit more in depth as to the fate of Moro and Elec. And I'll go a little bit more in depth as to why I felt this arc ended so poorly, even though I feel like Frieza hyped up Dragon Ball Super for the next arc. You see, the thing is that Gas was a generic villain. There was nothing really interesting about him. He had, you know, some cool abilities where, you know, he can, you know, manipulate his energy to create weapons and stuff. That was really cool. I think he had a really cool design. But ultimately, there's nothing about Gas that I'm saying, man, you know, years from now, I'm going to want to go back and reread those chapters of Gas fighting Goku and everybody else. Like, there was nothing about him that was really cool, and because Elec never really got to accomplish what he wanted, and he was brutally interrupted by Freeza, in his sense, there's nothing really memorable about him too. They were just like two brothers that just got killed, and now that Maki and Oil are now working for Freeza, basically, you know, I feel like the Heaters are going to be very, very, very forgettable characters in the future. I think the memorable character of this arc is ultimately Granolah, but as a result of all of that, I just feel like Elec was just truly never fleshed out. And we also never got a chance to see how strong Elec was. Like, some people were theorizing maybe Elec was really strong himself. Maybe he was even stronger than Granolah, but he was secretly hiding his power. Dragon Ball has done a lot of things like that before, where they'll have a character that you think is not the strongest, but then he's like, actually, you know what, I'm actually way stronger than Gas. You know what I'm saying? Even though that would have been difficult because of the wish and all that stuff, it would have been interesting to see if Elec made a secret wish for himself, or did anything along those lines for himself to become powerful, or at least exact some sort of revenge instead of just being killed like that. Like, I feel like everything that they built up for Elec just completely got wiped out. And it's unpredictable, which is good, but I just feel like his character could have just been used a lot more, considering that he really was the main villain of this arc, and it just feels kind of unsatisfying that the main villain of this arc just gets killed by Freeza, another villain, and then we just have to go on to another arc. So honestly, this Granolah arc ultimately feels like it never finished. Like, this feels like it's like a sub-arc for another arc. But then when you go back, well, it's like, well, what was the point of this arc? Just to establish Granolah as like a long-term ally now? You know what I'm saying? Like, it feels more too much setup instead of an actual core arc itself, somewhat similar to the Universe 6 tournament, as opposed to the other arcs that we've seen in Dragon Ball Super. And that takes us to another point here, guys, where we're going to start talking a little bit more about power scaling. So, how exactly is Freeza this strong now? Well, he learned how to go into Black Frieza, which I think is a pretty hilarious transformation. But the thing is that Freeza trained in his version of the Room of Spirit and Time for supposedly 10 years. Now, when you think about it like that, and when you think about the fact that Freeza was able to train for a few months and was able to fight against Super Saiyan Blues in the Resurrection of F-Arc, Freeza training for 10 years is pretty ridiculous, especially considering how he was one of the stronger characters in the Tournament of Power anyway, so he was pretty close to already being the strongest mortal alive or dead in the universe, and then now he trains for 10 years based off of how his race can gain power in such an insane amount of time, and based off of the fact that Frieza's gained more battle experience and is a much smarter fighter now. I really feel like Freeza, this is probably the most menacing and threatening Freeza will ever be, and I think by leaving Goku and Vegeta alive, I just think that's just going to continue to hook us. But in terms of power scaling, I mean, you would think that Goku and Vegeta, with Mastered Ultra Instinct and Ultra Ego, are not even close to him. Like, they would need to be like Ultra Ego Instinct Gogeta just to even be able to stand a chance at this point, if he was able to train for 10 years, and would probably need Broly's help and multiple other characters to come into it. So I am curious what you guys think about how strong Frieza actually is now. And then that takes us directly into Granolah. So, the thing about Granolah is that I think he is by far the most interesting character in the whole Dragon Ball universe now, because he still always had a plan to exact revenge against Frieza for what he did to the Ceruleans and such. And considering his small lifespan, I think the plot is putting us in a position where, because Granolah doesn't have that much time left to live, he needs to get something accomplished before he dies, which would make me believe that Granolah is definitely going to go after Frieza or work with somebody to make sure that Frieza dies again. And let's just be honest, just for the Dragon Ball universe to tie up into the future, because this eventually has to lead up to Oob and such, unless there's another major retcon, it just kind of makes sense for Frieza to stay dead to be consistent with what we originally perceived as Frieza being dead permanently in Dragon Ball Z. So as a result of that, I think Frieza kind of has to die again, and I wouldn't be surprised if Granolah is somehow involved with that in the next arc, because there's a timer on him in order to get this done, unless it's somehow reversed, but that's something that we would have to see coming up. But I definitely think we need to keep our eyes on Granolah, and last but not least, let's talk about 7-3. Now guys, I actually spent hours, thinking about this and writing down my points. I legitimately have no idea how 7-3 is going to be used now, and here's what I want you guys to do in the comment section. This is one situation because this is a really weird one, because when you look at a character like 7-3, he was completely linked to Elec, who's now dead. And he was extracted by Granolah. So, with the two heaters that are left working for Frieza now, and Gas and Elec being dead, well, what's gonna happen with him? Because he was the whole trigger of the arc itself, because his remnants were on planet Earth. So to be honest with you guys, I'm trying to think maybe Frieza can somehow get his hands on 7-3 and use 7-3 for himself. That's probably the most realistic thing I can see happening. But other than that, it's just like his character just exists in the universe now, and I really hope that he's not a forgotten character where like he just exists and like we just never did anything with him because they can never figure it out. I really don't think that should ever go in that direction, because the end of the Moro arc left 7-3 alive, and if he ends up being completely out of the Dragon Ball universe, that would be a very big bummer for everybody, because 7-3 has been such an interesting character with his ability to copy abilities and, just be such an incredible threat to the Dragon Ball universe itself. I think that because 7-3 is a verbal villain that doesn't really have any major motives. He would best be served as like a major henchman for another villain working under somebody like Freeza or whoever this new threat would be. But I definitely can't see him being a main villain because I just don't think there's enough on his character to do it, unless there's somebody smarter who's utilizing him, similar to how he was used in the Moro arc. But ultimately, guys, these have been all of my thoughts on Black Frieza, this entire arc itself, and everything what we should expect. So until next time, please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe, and remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys.